Mr. Gallagher, you have already established that you were at the scene on January 29th, early morning, January 29th, 2022. We've seen the video of the leaf blower, correct?
That is correct.
So you were integral to at least an initial search of the scene, which recovered the drinking glass that you've shown us, as well as some of the blood byproduct that you've talked about.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. You were the ranking person on the scene. You've already described that.
Yes, that is correct.
There were also several other officers from Canton PD who were there with you.
Yes, there was 4 other officers. Yeah.
You were responsible for utilizing certain equipment. You chose a leaf blower at the time, correct?
I did, yes.
There was also, I'm guessing, there was also some use of your hands and or the gloved hands with some others to recover some of the items.
Yeah, I didn't use my hands.
How did you get the glass into a bag?
That was Detective Sergeant Lang.
Somebody had to pick it up, right?
Correct.
Did anybody at Canton PD, separating out Massachusetts State Police,
correct,
did you sit down at Canton PD and provide an interview with anybody at Canton PD about your conduct at the scene?
What do you mean by conduct?
What do you
Going
mean?
to the scene, collecting evidence, securing evidence, transporting evidence, booking evidence, those kinds of things. Your conduct at the scene, sir.
Yeah, I briefed my superiors, yes.
Okay, other than briefing, was there a formal report written?
No.
Or a formal interview conducted of you?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Tell us when you wrote your report about what happened at the scene, memorializing what you did at the scene.
I didn't.
You didn't write a report?
About the scene that day at the scene?
Correct, about this investigation.
I only did the metadata report. I did not
Yeah,
write a report at the scene.
You never,
Metadata.
the fact is you never wrote any report about what happened at the scene, correct?
Correct.
You didn't memorialize that in any formal way on Canton PD letterhead to describe what you did and how you did it at the scene.
No.
But in this case, quite the opposite happened. You were the one that was in the video utilizing the leaf blower, correct?
That's correct.
You were the one that actually exposed the drinking glass, correct?
Correct, yes.
You noted the drinking glass and actually called somebody else over to take a look at it, correct?
That's correct.
You directed someone, Sergeant Lang, to pick up the drinking glass and recover it as a potential piece of evidence.
That is correct.
You noted the blood or the coagulation of blood in and around that area, correct?
That is correct.
You noted where you believe the drinking glass was, in other words, what location, if there were grid coordinates, where it would be, correct?
Correct.
So you would agree with me, Mr. Gallagher, that in this circumstance, you were the centerpiece of the recovery of evidence and the investigation as it was at that time in that limited context. You were the centerpiece of what was happening at the scene, correct?
And I made sure it was documented by Detective Sergeant Lang.
But you didn't find it important enough to write a report yourself.
I think that's poor misrepresentation. There's a person fighting for their life. It was very important.
When you were there at the scene at what time was it, by the way?
I got there shortly after 7.
Okay, you knew that that person who was fighting for his life had already been transported and was in good care, as best care we can provide at Good Samaritan Hospital, correct?
That is correct.
So certainly you're not excusing away the idea that you didn't memorialize your conduct because you were too busy fighting for someone's life. That's not what you're saying.
No, definitely is not what I'm
Okay.
saying.
That's why you're highly trained to memorialize and report everything that you do in that regard in a report that can later be used forensically, in other words, in a courtroom setting, to recreate as best you can with as much detail as you can exactly what you did and how you did it and where it was done, correct?
Sure. Yes.
Why didn't you write a report?
During the time that you were removing materials in and around the area of the flagpole going out to the, I think you called it the berm. And you said you searched for the area in that 50 square foot area by removing materials, getting down to moving the snow, getting down to all the way down to the lawn.
Yes.
Okay. You did not see a single piece of bright red plastic taillight material either, did you?
No, sir, not in that area.
As a matter of fact, you didn't see 46 pieces of taillight material, either clear or bright red plastic, in any part of the area that you searched.
No, the only thing we discovered was the blood sampling in the glass. That is correct.
Speaking of the glass, that's a good segue. You found that piece of broken drinking glass that you brought in and showed the jurors yesterday, correct?
That's correct.
Did you search the house at all to determine whether or not there was any matching glass in the home?
No, I did not.
With regard to the time that you were inside the residence, You did not seek to or ask permission to look around any place other than where you happen to be standing, which is right inside that front door of the family room, sort of adjacent to the kitchen area, correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
You didn't walk into any adjacent rooms. You didn't walk into any, you didn't search the kitchen area.
I did not. No, sir.
You didn't look through the cabinets or anything like that.
Absolutely not. No.
You didn't look at the glassware.
Absolutely not. No.
You didn't go down to the basement. We talked about that previously.
Correct.
And-
No, absolutely not.
Okay. You didn't go out to the garage.
No, sir.
You
No.
didn't look around the garage.
No.
Did you
Other
investigate
than
anything?
walking in and basically where you just described, you didn't do anything to search the interior of that house for anything.
No, I wasn't there to search at all.
Okay. You also didn't, subsequent to that, you didn't seek or receive a search warrant.
No, I did not.
Okay. You didn't believe that it was necessary, in your mind, it was necessary to seek a search warrant to search the interior of that house.
That's absolutely correct.
You didn't separate any of the witnesses that were, or any of the occupants that you saw inside the house or you came across inside the house, for instance, by taking them to the station, putting them in separate rooms so that they couldn't coordinate testimony, things of that nature
At that time,
at that time.
so Detective Sergeant Lank was there to speak with Jennifer McCabe only.
Okay. But there were others in the house.
There were others in the house, yes.
I'm just trying to figure out whether or not you took the added step of separating those witnesses, asking those witnesses potentially to join you down at the station, putting them in separate rooms, separating those witnesses. You did not do that.
Not at that time, no.
No.
Okay, at any time, did you?
No, we shortly thereafter, we were removed from the investigation. We removed ourselves from the investigation.
And before you were removed from the investigation, you just left the house after the conversation that Sergeant Lank had with Jennifer McCabe, correct?
Yes, after he took Jennifer McCabe's statement, we left the house, yes.
Is the reason that you didn't seek a search warrant or separate the witnesses or ask any of the potential witnesses to join you down at the station, did that have anything to do with your knowledge that the homeowner was a police officer?
Absolutely none. I've actually executed warrants on police officers' houses in the past, including police officers I personally worked with and had to charge some of their children. So that absolutely would not factor into a reason.
Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
I recognize the camera in the door.
Okay. Is this a shot of Deputy Chief Kelleher's front porch?
It appears to be.
Okay. Did you seek to secure any footage from that Arlo camera
I did not.
from Deputy Chief Kelleher?
I did not.
Did you ask him whether or not he had reviewed the footage for a determination whether or not it caught any of the incident that may have occurred at or around 34 Fairview on January 29th, the early morning hours of January 29th?
I don't know if I did. I know it would not have,
How do you know it would not have?
because I know what that camera captures.
How do you know what that camera captures?
Because I've picked up packages for Deputy Chief Kelleher in the past. I know it captures his doorstep and a portion of the front lawn.
Do you believe that it would have been best practices to go ahead and secure that footage so we don't have to take anybody's word for it? We could actually look at the footage ourselves.
I didn't do that.
I mean, it's bullshit, but all
You would
right.
agree, as a former detective and former head of detectives, that there are protocols for securing evidence of all types, correct?
Correct.
Those protocols dictate that not only is evidence properly secured, once it's seized, it needs to be properly secured, and it needs to be separated from other evidence to avoid something known as cross-contamination, correct?
Correct.
And you would agree with me that that is paramount in evidence handling in any investigation, correct?
Yes.
And that's because once evidence is cross-contaminated, its integrity basically collapses, right?
That's correct.
It's especially true of biological material, is that right?
Yes.
Because biological material, unlike a shovel, the biological material on the shovel becomes hyper sensitive. It's hyper important. It can be cross-contaminated with other items.
Sure.
It can tell an incorrect story, correct?
Yes.
It could tell, if there's cross-contamination, it could tell a false story.
It's been done. Yes.
I'd like you to take a look at a series of photographs, if we could. Do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph?
Yes.
What is that?
That's the Stop and Shop bag that contained the 6 samples.
That's how blood collection
is
usually looks.
Inside that, what's depicted inside that bag?
The red solo cups with coagulated blood.
We've agreed already that the blood was stored in non-sterile solo cups, correct?
Correct.
We've agreed that those cups were not sealed. The cups themselves were not sealed. There was no cap. There was no plastic, plasticine, saran wrap, nothing put over
No
the cups,
cap.
correct?
That is correct.
So they were open. They were not in an evidence bag. They were in a grocery bag, correct?
They were.
And obviously that bag, it goes without saying, is not a forensically sterile item either, correct?
Most bags are not sterilized.
And the
Ooh,
not only
wow.
the cups were not sealed, the bag that the cups were in was not sealed.
They were only closed. Correct.
You will agree that having unsealed and unsecured biological material, specifically blood material, situated right next to the right rear quarter panel of that SUV would not be within normal protocols for securing evidence, correct?
This was in the hands of a criminalist. It was an exchange of custody. I don't have any issue with it.
You don't know.
I mean, you
you
don't.
have no personal knowledge
everybody
of where
else
that bag
could.
had been or where the cups had been previous to that photograph being taken.
Correct.
You will agree that having unsealed and unsecured blood right next to the right rear of the SUV is a recipe for cross-contamination, wouldn't you?
Not in the hands of a trained criminalist. I wouldn't know.
Well, generally speaking, there were other people there that weren't the trained criminalists, right?
There was a photographer who took the pictures.
Who's not a trained criminalist.
Correct. But they,
I'm
it
a
wasn't- the
trained
cups weren't
criminal.
in his hands. It was in the criminalist's hands. Those are the criminalist's hands you see gloved in that photo.
That's not my question. My question is, there was unsealed blood and in an unsealed bag for how much time you don't know, sitting right there by the right rear of that SUV, correct?
No, I do know,
How do you know?
because I'm the one that brought the bag with the criminalist to that area. They photographed it, documented it, and then they transferred it to their plastic containers.
And before you grab that bag, you don't know where that bag had been for 3 days hence, 3 days before.
I know it had been in the temporary evidence room in a refrigerator.
You actually never saw it in the temporary evidence room in the refrigerator until February 1st, did you?
I don't recall.
So you don't know where that bag had been. You don't know who had handled those cups before you pulled them out of that temporary evidence locker, correct?
I have no personal knowledge if anybody else, I have no personal knowledge. I took them
Bridget
out of
chain of
the
custody, man.
refrigerator. That's all I can testify to.
Do you remember us talking about this about a year ago?
Yes,
And I asked you, would you agree that having unsealed and unsecured blood next to the right rear portion of the SUV is a recipe for cross-contamination? I asked you that question.
you did.
And you said, well, it's not a yes or no, but for your purposes, I would say yes.
Correct.
So it is, at least in your mind, a recipe for potential cross-contamination, correct?
Not in this particular situation, which
Why?
was clarified later on.
Although you
Oh.
did say yes in answer
Hypothetically,
to my
anything,
question.
hypothetically, anything is possible. Yes.
Well, not anything. There are things that aren't.
You indicated that you were spitballing, to use your word, correct?
Correct.
Trying to figure out what happened.
Correct.
That's the job of an investigator, correct?
That is
Yeah.
correct.
You
Yes,
don't
sir.
just take witnesses' words for things, do you?
That is correct.
You have to corroborate things.
Yes.
You
have
don't
to
just
look
listen
deeper.
to people.
Yes.
Ask more questions.
Absolutely.
Actually investigate.
That's why we're here today.
No, you're not. That's
You
the
don't
whole
rule
point.
out anything or anyone
We
right
didn't-
off the bat, correct?
Correct. and we
No
did not.
one is ruled out. Nothing is ruled out,
That is
correct?
correct.
You
Yes.
follow where the evidence leads you, period, amen.
Absolutely.
You didn't seek, to separate the occupants at 34 Fairview, correct?
No.
You didn't interview Brian Albert formally, did you?
I did not. No.
You were asked by Mr. Brennan, did he ever end the conversation precipitously? Did he end it early or anything like that? He didn't end any interview because he wasn't interviewed, correct?
That is correct.
You didn't interview Brian Higgins.
That is correct.
You wouldn't interview Brian Higgins because he's your personal friend, correct?
Correct.
But you didn't have anybody else interview him either, did you?
Again, we're talking. I think
Ah,
we've
Brian
gone over
didn't do
this, and
nothing.
maybe you didn't understand it. I didn't know Brian Higgins was at the house at that time.
Because you didn't ask anybody else who was at the house at that time.
I wasn't talking to anybody at that house. Correct.
Might have been a good idea, wouldn't it?
Not at that time. We were there for one specific reason. We wanted to get to the hospital. So no.
Might have been a
I
good
disagree.
idea.
You're a leaf
to sit,
blower.
Mr. Albert down and say, there, you're shaking your head again. I'm not done with my question. Might
You're
have been a
leaf
good
blowing
idea
the
to
ground.
tell him,
You had
since
time
you
to ask
happened to be
questions.
there, no sweat off your brow to sit Mr. Albert down and say, by the way, I got a pen and a paper. Who was here last night, just before John O'Keefe was found dead on your lawn? Who was here? Might have been a good idea, correct?
So that was already done by Detective Sergeant Lank, and it was documented in his report of everybody of what Mr. Jackson is asking.
Then how did you two not know that Brian Higgins was there?
I don't know where.
At
I
34.
mean, I'm confused. At what time?
Right.
At what time?
Exactly.
At what time?
Good
When
question.
John O'Keefe arrived
Okay.
at 34 Fairview after midnight on January 29th, 2022.
So when I discovered Brian Higgins was there, wasn't until I read the report.
If you were standing in the house, Sergeant Lang, you just told these jurors, knew that Brian Higgins and everybody else was there.
He had obtained the names. He hadn't written the report yet.
I hadn't told his boss,
I don't recall.
even though you two went together to interview yet another witness.
That's correct. There was a very fast-moving scene and pace. That is correct.
You're leaf blowing the ground, man. You can't convince us it was fast moving.
While you were spitballing, you also didn't secure the camera footage that we've talked about, the Arlo footage.
Yes, that's correct.
You also didn't actually formally search the house, correct?
Absolutely
We
correct.
just talked about that. You didn't seek consent by Brian, pardon me, by Brian Albert to search the house, correct?
That's correct.
You also didn't seek a search warrant. You talked about that, correct?
Correct.
You don't get punished or in trouble if you seek a search warrant and a judge who has to sign the search warrant. Normal citizens can't do that. It requires a judge's signature. You don't get in trouble or get spanked or get slapped or get fined if you seek a search warrant that is denied, correct?
In this particular situation, I would need to articulate facts, certain
Articulate
circumstances, and witness statements.
circumstances, your witness
What I
statement.
had was nobody could put John O'Keefe in the house, including Miss Reed.
How do you know? You didn't
and
interview
that
anybody.
We had a glass where they were coming from a bar. And I had 3 separate police officers, including myself, that had been in that house on 3 separate occasions.
Look at him
and saw
looking at the
nothing
jury.
Amiss.
Scanning him with his
I have a
eyes.
good faith obligation
Talking to each
to
one.
present the truth to a judge.
You guys testified
And
a
if
lot.
I don't, I can be found, end up on a Brady list or a Giglio list, as you know. And I-
Giglio
my
list.
right to my
It's a gigolo
credibility
list.
to testify in my career is basically over.
Yeah,
So
those
yes,
are
you can
different
get in
lists.
trouble.
You're talking about lying in an affidavit, sir.
I'm talking about misleading.
Correct.
I would
Yeah.
have to twist circumstances to have the right to
No, you wouldn't. You have
search
a
Brian
dead
Albert's
guy on
house.
the
We had no
lawn.
reason, and there's been no reason since.
How about this? How about this? There's a dead guy on the lawn that looked like he potentially could have been in a physical altercation.
Exactly. Done.
Might that be
It's
an
probable
excuse
cause.
to go inside the house and see if there was a struggle that started in the house?
There's still no evidence to go into the house.
You're the guy that's out on the lawn with no coat on. You think the coat might be inside the house? That might be a reasonable assumption. Yes or no?
No.
You're the guy
No.
outside with no shoe on. You think the shoe might be inside the house?
No
That
way.
might be a reasonable assumption.
I never saw Mr. O'Keefe. I wasn't aware that he
Because you didn't
have his
seek
shoes.
to find out the details. Other people knew every single fact that I just suggested at the time you walked in the house, correct? The fact is you didn't seek a search warrant.
I wouldn't. Correct.
The fact is you never searched the house.
That's correct.
The fact is you never searched the basement.
That's correct.
The fact is you never searched the garage.
That's correct.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Get wrecked. You want to see how to close out a cross-examination, well, in a recross in this case. That was it, man. That was expertly done. He made him look like an absolute fucking fool. Beautiful. Beautiful. Why didn't you ask any questions of it? You're a police lieutenant. You didn't ask anybody anything. You don't know anything about the scene. You're like, nah, there's no probable cause here. There's a dead guy. You're all the way to probable cause. What's the probable cause that there might be evidence inside this house of the dead guy? Well, there's a dead guy. It gets so frustrating because they operate in this realm of pretend that doesn't actually exist. It's just words on fucking paper. Maybe I'm sensitive because my house was searched on way less than a dead guy.